the final note of the waltz hung in the air, a shimmering cord suspended in the heat of 1,000 candles. Lord Ashworth's hand was a formal, warm pressure on the small of my back, right where the whalebone stays of my corset dug into my flesh like a vengeful god. He smiled, his teeth a flash of white in the gaslight. "Miss Eleanor, you are the very picture of elegance tonight." A lie. I was a monument to deception. Beneath the 20 pounds of silk, lace, and steel that constituted my evening gown, a cold dread was coiling in my belly. It was an urgent, primal call, one that cared little for elegance or the strictures of polite society. My breath hitched, a tiny, desperate gasp that my corset immediately punished. I returned his smile, a carefully constructed artifice of pleasantry. "You are too kind, my lord." But my eyes, over the crisp line of his shoulder, were searching for Agnes. The day had begun, as all days did, with a battle. Agnes, my maid, was my general. Her nimble fingers, the orchestrators of my daily armoring. First the thin linen chemise, a whisper against the skin. Then the cage. The corset was hoisted and pulled, the laces drawn so tight I felt my lower ribs protest, shifting to accommodate the tyranny of fashion. I held onto the bedpost, my knuckles white, breathing in as Agnes pulled, breathing out as she cinched, stealing the very air from my lungs until my waist was a thing of impossible delicacy. "Just a fraction more, miss," she'd murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. "For the line of the bodice." I had only nodded, my vision momentarily graying at the edges. Over this went the petticoats, a sea of starched cotton and lace, one upon the other, until I was the center of a billowing cloud. Finally, the crinoline. A marvel of engineering, a cage of flexible steel hoops that transformed me from a woman into a walking bell. It was 6 feet in diameter, a mobile architecture that dictated how I walked, where I sat, and the precise, calculated angle required to navigate a doorway. The gown itself, a cascade of sapphire silk, was the final flourish, the beautiful, deceptive skin over the complex machinery beneath. To the world, I was a vision. To myself, I was a prisoner in a fortress of my own making. Now, in the crush of the Marquisate of Pembroke's ballroom, the fortress was becoming a trap. My signal to Agnes was subtle, a flutter of my fan that was 2 beats too slow. Her eyes met mine from across the room where she stood like a silent shadow near the damask-draped walls. A flicker of understanding, a barely perceptible nod. The campaign would begin. Excusing myself from Lord Ashworth with a practiced murmur about the heat, I began the perilous journey. Moving through the crowd was like piloting a ship through a treacherous channel. The steel hoops of my crinoline bumped against gentlemen's legs and tangled with the hems of other ladies' gowns, each collision sending a jolt of panic through me. I had to tilt and sway, a constant, private ballet of spatial awareness, all while maintaining a serene smile. Agnes was my vanguard, clearing a path with quiet deference. "Pardon me, my lord, if you please, madam." We didn't head for the water closet, a new and noisy contraption for the gentlemen. Our destination was far more discreet. The ladies' retiring room. It sounded like a place of serene respite, but we knew it for what it was, a command center, a pit stop in the Grand Prix of social survival. The room was furnished with plush chaises and ornate vanities, but its true purpose was hidden in plain sight. Behind a gilded screen stood a row of commodes, their mahogany exteriors polished to a high gleam, concealing the simple porcelain chamber pots within. A pair of maids, not unlike Agnes, stood ready, their faces impassive. But the room was occupied. Lady Beatrice Ainsworth, my supposed rival for Lord Ashworth's affections, was just emerging from behind the screen, her own maid fussing with a loose ribbon on her bodice. Her face was pale, her usual look of haughty confidence replaced by a fragile, brittle tension. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw not a rival, but a fellow soldier, weary from the same invisible war. Agnes steered me toward an unoccupied corner. "We must wait, miss," she whispered, her voice a low anchor in my rising tide of panic. The waiting was an agony. Every polite inquiry from a passing acquaintance felt like an interrogation. Every rustle of my own silk skirts was a cannon shot in the silent room. And then I heard it, a choked, desperate sob from behind a potted palm near the window. It was Lady Beatrice, her back to the room, her shoulders shaking. Her maid was murmuring to her, her words a frantic, hushed stream. "It cannot be helped, my lady. You must be calm." Calm? Beatrice's voice was a raw, broken thing, stripped of all its drawing-room affectation. "He will be ruined. I will be ruined. This condition, it is a death sentence." A cold understanding washed over me, more shocking than my own discomfort. A condition. A secret that no corset could contain forever. The rigid lines of society we all thought to uphold could be shattered by the simple, undeniable truth of biology. All her barbed comments, her competitive glares, were the armor for a terror I couldn't have imagined. My own urgency suddenly felt trivial, a fleeting discomfort against the landscape of her impending ruin. Another truth layered itself upon the first, a sharp and unwelcome companion to my physical distress. Underneath the yards of fabric, I felt the familiar dull ache in my womb, the telltale dampness against the folded linen cloths held in place by a simple belt. My monthly trial, the secret I managed in absolute silence, changing the soft rags a dozen times a day, washing them in secret, pretending this fundamental part of my existence was a shameful fiction. We were all hiding something. Every woman in this room was a master of concealment, our bodies the ultimate secret keepers. The maid finally led Lady Beatrice away, her face a mask of composure once more, but her eyes, haunted. The commode was free. "Now, miss," Agnes said, her tone gentle but firm. She was all business. The screen provided a flimsy illusion of privacy. The real work was in the mechanics, the technique passed down from mother to daughter, from maid to mistress. Lifting the gown was impossible. It was a structured object, not a piece of clothing. Instead, Agnes knelt, a priestess at a strange altar. Her hands, practiced and sure, found the openings in the architecture. She reached deep into the labyrinth of petticoats. My drawers, a recent and revolutionary concession to modesty after a series of public incidents involving crinolines and strong gusts of wind, were of the split crotch design. 2 separate tubes of cotton, joined only at the waistband. A work of practical genius that allowed for this very moment. They provided the illusion of coverage without impeding the necessary function. Agnes's hands were a disembodied presence beneath my skirts. She positioned the oval-shaped chamber pot, its specific design meant to nestle between the legs and under the steel cage. "Ready, miss." The entire process was a feat of strategic positioning and muscle control, a bizarre contortion performed in near-total darkness, guided only by feel. I had to balance myself, holding my core impossibly still within the corset's grip, leaning forward just so. The indignity of it was staggering. To be a grown woman, trussed and helpless, relying on another to manage the most basic of human needs. The relief when it came was immediate and profound, but it was followed by a wave of something else, a cold, sharp anger. This was the life I was meant to aspire to? A gilded cage, both literally and figuratively, where my body was not my own, where I was an object to be decorated, managed, and controlled, my natural functions a logistical nightmare to be hidden at all costs. I thought of Lady Beatrice's terror, of my own silent monthly burden, of the sheer exhausting effort required just to exist in this world. As Agnes worked with swift, silent efficiency, using soft linen cloths to clean up, my hand went to the laces of my own corset, hidden beneath the bodice. My fingers fumbled, found the knot, and I pulled. Not enough for anyone to notice, not enough to ruin the line of the dress, just a fraction, a quarter of an inch of slack. But it was enough. Enough to take a full, deep, unimpeded breath. It was a tiny, secret rebellion, an intake of air that was entirely my own. Agnes finished her work. The pot was lidded, ready to be discreetly emptied by the retiring room maids. She rose and smoothed my skirts, her expression unchanged, as if she hadn't just been the chief engineer of a delicate plumbing operation. "All is well, Miss Eleanor." We walked back into the ballroom. The music swelled, the dancers spun, the constellation of candles burned just as brightly. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Lord Ashworth was waiting, his smile undimmed. He said, his voice a playful murmur, "I feared you had abandoned me." Before, I might have blushed. I might have felt a flutter of excitement. Now, his polished charm seemed like another layer of artifice, as hollow as my crinoline. I looked past him, my gaze sweeping over the sea of smiling, dancing women. I saw them now not as a gallery of competitors, but as a silent sisterhood. Each one was a fortress, defending her own secrets, managing her own invisible burdens with military precision. I saw the strain behind their smiles, the calculation in their graceful movements, the immense psychological resilience required to maintain this elaborate charade. My eyes found Lady Beatrice across the room. She was laughing at something a gentleman had said, her fan moving with practiced elegance. But her eyes, for a fleeting second, met mine. In them, I saw no animosity. I saw the echo of her desperation in the retiring room. And in that shared glance, a flicker of an alliance was forged, an unspoken acknowledgement of the hidden, desperate humanity beneath the silk and steel. She gave a nod so infinitesimal it was barely there, a signal of shared understanding. I took Lord Ashworth's offered hand, letting him lead me back into the dance. I moved through the steps, my body performing the familiar choreography, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I was aware of the space I had created for my lungs, the tiny pocket of freedom I had claimed for myself. The music played on, a beautiful, swirling score for our collective, elegant imprisonment. But tonight, for the first time, I felt the strength in my own bones, not just the unyielding press of the whalebone stays around them. I was a work of art, yes, but I was also the artist, the engineer, the survivor.